This other one. How many of you are there who else is there for research? Now you have English concept there. Huh? No, he's there. Where is he? And who else? Only one second. This was the same one that we had done, no? The first one, this is, no? This one that you all got. No, the topo. You have not studied on it. You have not studied that seriously. Okay. Okay, actually, I'm here to take your English today only for the day. Since yes, ma'am is not keeping it. Yeah. What are your names?
Rakhi.
Rakhi. Favorite school?
Are
you?
I in school Rai.
Grand which?
Yeah.
Being a teacher at Ryan Harvard from almost 2005 to 2016 teaching there. Who's your principal now? Your principal.
Yeah, I'm not
We also learn. Okay, so let's start. I don't think most of them are going to. You all know your portion, no? What's your syllabus for the boards? What do you want to be here? Some?
First 6 are not coming. First 6 or 5 are not coming.
First 5 are not coming, 6 onwards is coming. There's some long time. So last year you all have done 1 to 6, 1 to 6, right?
Yes.
So now you will have 6 to 10, 6 to 10. So one chapter of last year and one poem. So you will have daffodils of last year and then angel in disguise. Okay? So today we will pick up an angel in disguise. That's not done, no? Right?
It was done last year.
But here this time, this year it's not being done, no? So I think have to take this. Okay, so you have done this last year. What is it that you all remember? What is the main theme of the story? What is it that you all learned from this?
I guess there was a family, and then it had some kids. So their mother had died, and then they were adopted by the villagers. Somewhere adopted by the villagers, and someone said to, I guess, that house where
What had happened to the mother?
she had died.
How?
She was drunk.
Yes. She was drunk. She was
She fell on.
She fell on the threshold of the door of the house. So, like at the entrance, she fell and she died. Then, how many children were there? 3. How many boys, how many girls?
One boy,
One boy, two girls. And?
out of them, one was handicapped.
Yes.
She couldn't walk.
Yes. Why she couldn't walk?
She fell when she was
She had fallen and she had hurt her spine. She was totally paralyzed. Her name was Maggie. And then what happens?
Then all the villagers came and one wanted to adopt her, so
Yes.
Joe Thompson came into order.
Yes. Joe Thompson, who was he?
He was a
Wheelwright. Wheelwright. He used to build carts and wheels. So he comes and he lives where everyone leaves. She's the only one left in the house. Then what happens? He takes her along. Where does he take her? To his house. And what is his intention actually? What is he planning to do?
keep her for 2 days and then send her out to the house.
Yes, to the like the orphanage where people, children or and the others who need help are kept. What happens? But when he takes her there, what about his wife?
she refuses to keep her.
Yes. Now this couple is childless; they don't have their own child. And the wife, Mrs. Thompson, she's supposed to be very cold and she doesn't want anyone around. So initially, is she welcoming towards the girl? No. Then what happens? He leaves her over there. Huh?
He spends some time
To spend some time together and he goes and does his work. Then what happens? When he comes back home, it was dark. What does he see?
She was taking care of her.
Yes, he could not see her face, that is, he could not see his wife's face. Probably the window was here and her back was turned towards the window, but he could see the girl's expressions. So from the expression, he could make out that she's pleased, she's happy, she looks contented. From the conversation you could make out that okay, she seems to be happy with the talk that they are having. Then what happens?
So I agrees to keep her.
Yes. Then they have a conversation, and finally, the wife says that we should keep her. So then she becomes like an angel in disguise. So we do the story. First, I'll read this part on the left, the box. T.S. Arthur was a popular 19th century American writer. His stories, written with compassion and sensitivity, articulate and spread values and ideas that were associated with respectable middle class life in America. English. Today I'm not teaching you geography. Why are you late?
I slept, then I woke up late.
You don't put the alarm on.
Then I put alarm.
Then you were so much deep in sleep or what? Okay, so what's the name of the author? T.S. So, in his story, we are on this page, page number 76. An angel in disguise, and we are doing that introductory part on the left. I'll get the first para now, and I'm on the second para. You all of you keep some pencil in your hand because there are a lot of words of which you need to write the meanings. Then, in his story, An Angel in Disguise, T.S. Arthur describes the transformative and restorative power of selfless love. It relates the advent of Maggie, a frail young orphan, into the lives of Wheelwright, Joe Thompson, and his vinegar tempered wife Jane. Vinegar tempered is ill tempered. And the no pencil? Huh? I'll give you one, I have a spare one. I don't know where it was. So vinegar tempered means ill tempered by Jane. And the miraculous effect that the child's presence has on the woman's character and the happiness that she brings to her adoptive family. Okay, adoptive family is the family that's adopted. So we start an angel in disguise. Idleness, vice, intemperance. Intemperance is lack of restraint. Lack of restraint. Lack of restraint means lack of control. Huh? Had done their miserable work, and the dead mother lay cold and still amid her wretched children. Wretched, unhappy. She had fallen upon the threshold of her own door in a drunken fit. Threshold means at the entrance of her door. In a drunken fit and died in the presence of her frightened little ones. Death touches the spring of our common humanity. This woman had been despised, scoffed at, and angrily denounced by nearly every man, woman, and child in the village. But now, as the fact of her death was passed from lip to lip in subdued tones, pity took the place of anger and sorrow of denunciation. Neighbors went hastily to the old tumble-down hut in which she had secured little more than a place of shelter from summer heats and winter cold, some with grave clothes for a decent interment of the body, and some with food for the half-starving children, 3 in number. So here now the word scoffed, scoffed, mocked at, denounced, condemned. Grave clothes, what do we mean by grave clothes? Clothes for burial. Grave clothes. Then interment, funeral rites, tumble down, dilapidated. Dilapidated means old, bad condition. Any word I'm not able to find? Tell me. So we, anyways, again we reading and I'll explain, so you can place that word over there with that. Death touches the spring of our common humanity. Means what? That death is common to all, right? All of us humans who are there, humanity is ultimately going to die someday or the other. This woman had been despised, scoffed at, and angrily denounced. Like people had just left her to herself. They used to tease her, they used to mock at her because she was a drunkard, she was poor, by nearly every man, woman, and child in the village. But now, as the fact of her death was passed from lip to lip in subdued tones is in hushed tones. Okay, people were talking about her in subdued tones. Pity took the place of anger. What happened now? People were angry, right? Whenever somebody dies, what happens? You don't bother about whether the person was bad or good, right? Even if the person had been bad, you feel sad when a person dies, right? So a similar thing happened now. So pity took the place of where was it?
Pity took the place of
Pity took the place of anger, sorrow of denunciation. So what happened? There was anger for her, but now there was people felt pitiful about her and denunciation. Denunciation means to condemn, to not include somebody as a part of your social group. Okay, took the place of sorrow, right? People now felt sorry for her situation. Neighbors went hastily to the old tumble down hut. Tumble down means dilapidated. You know, it was in a very shabby state, in which she had secured little more than a place for a place of shelter from summer heats and winter cold. Some with grave clothes. So these people who went over there, some of them went with grave clothes for which they would require for her burial, for a decent interment of the body. So for carrying out her funeral rites, because she only had these 3 children. So obviously the villagers would have to take responsibility. And some with food for the half-starving children, 3 in number. How many children were there? 3 children. Of these, John, the oldest, a boy of 12, was a stout lad, able to earn his living with any farmer. Who was the oldest?
John.
John. How old was he?
12.
And how did he look?
Lad.
Yes, stout. Means he was healthy. Huh? Stout lad means a boy. So he was a stout lad and able to earn his living with any farmer. He could have earned because he was healthy, he was active. He could have gone and worked with any farmer. Second one, Kate. Between 10 and 11 was bright, active girl, out of whom something clever might be made of, if in good hands. So the second girl was Kate. How old was she? 10 to 11 years. And how was she? She was a smart girl, right? So she would have been able to make a living for herself even when she grew up, and now also she could do something at least on her own. But poor little Maggie, the youngest, was hopelessly diseased. The youngest girl was Maggie. How was she? Diseased. hours before, a fall from a window had injured her spine. What had happened to her? The fall from the window had injured her spine. And she had not been able to leave her bed since, except when lifted in the arms of her mother. So she was totally, you can say, paralyzed, right? So she was diseased and she was paralyzed. Okay, tell me till here what we did in your own words about the three children. Name the three children and how old they were and something about them. Try not to speak.
John, Kate, and
John was the eldest, and then he was a heavy boy. Then Katie was a smart girl. Kate was a smart girl. She would look out for herself. She was between 10 and 12. And Maggie was handicapped as she fell from the way.
Yes. And which is the time that she could move from one place to the other? Only when her mother lifted her, otherwise she was not capable of moving at all by herself. And what had happened to your mother?
Yeah, she was drunk and she
Where had she fallen?
Threshold.
At the threshold of their house. How was the house? Tumble down. Which is the other word for tumble down? Dilapidated. You need to write synonyms because what will happen in your exam, you will have an extract and 4 or 5 questions from the same chapter. So you cannot repeat the same word again and again. Or in one answer also, if you write tumble down, and then the next sentence, if you are referring to it and you write dilapidated, that would be much better. So synonyms are important. Then, what is to be done with the children? That was the chief question now. The dead mother would go underground. Underground in the sense, she would be buried. And be forever beyond all care or concern of the villagers. But the children must not be left to starve. After considering the matter and taking it over with his wife, Farmer Jones said that he would take John. So who said who would take John? Farmer Jones. Farmer Jones. Farmer Jones said that he would take John and do well by him now that his mother was out of the way. And Mrs. Ellis, who had been looking out for a bound girl. Bound girl means a servant. Okay? So write down in your books, servant. So who took Kate? Mrs. Ellis. And what would she work as?
Servant.
Yes. Servant. Bound girl. So concluded that it would be charitable in her to make choice of Katie, even though she was too young to be of much use for several years. She was too small, right? So at this age of 10 or 11 years, there's nothing much that she could do. But then she said, okay, let me take her, and then obviously she would use her for doing her household work, whatever it was.
And here her name is written Katie, and in previous page it was written Kate.
Kate, yeah. So, Kate might have been her pet name and you can write either. Huh? So I'll also write it over here, Kate or Katie. I'll put it in brackets. Huh? Both will be accepted in the exam. So don't worry about that. Then, I could do much better, I know, said Mrs. Ellis, but as no one seems inclined to take her means no one wants to take her. Nobody has a wish to take her. Huh? I must act from a sense of duty, expect to have trouble with the child, for she's an undisciplined thing, used to having her own way. So what did she say for Katie?
That she was a disciplined.
Yes, and she was expecting trouble because she was not her own child and the girl was going to be with her. So trouble in the sense the girl was indisciplined, she would not listen to her. So she was already foreseeing that I'm going to have some kind of a difficulty, but still she took her saying that she was being charitable. But no one said, I'll take Maggie. Pitying glances were cast on her wan and wasted. Wan and wasted is lonely, of no use. Wan and wasted. Write this down. Of no use. Okay. So this van actually means lonely. So this was like we are talking about Maggie now. So pitying glances were cast on her wan and wasted form. Why are we calling her form wan and wasted?
She was paralyzed.
She was paralyzed. She could not do anything. There's nothing that she could do on her own. So she wouldn't have been of use to anyone. In fact, there would be someone who would have to take care of her. Wan and wasted form, and thoughts were troubled on her account. Mothers brought cast off garments. Cast off means used clothes. Cast off garments and removing her soiled and ragged clothes, dressed her in clean attire. Attire is again clothes. They got their clothes and dressed her up in good clothes. नहीं मैंने मिनिमाइज किया चालू ही है देखो आप दिख रहा होगा और ये क्लास में बहुत गर्म हो रही है एसी नहीं है क्या शायद एनर्जी कंजर्व कर रहे हो क्या
ये एकदम थोड़ा सो रहा है
वो सुबह में 7:30 होता था कभी अभी फिलहाल तो जाना होगा ओके so yeah, the second line. Pitying glances were cast on her wan and wasted form, and thoughts were troubled on her account. In case there's anything you're not understanding while I'm doing, you stop me over there, okay? Even if it's some small thing, some word, some conceptual. Okay. So mothers brought cast off garment. Okay, bought and brought, you know the difference. What?
What is fine?
Correct. And brought is to
Bring.
bring. So here did they bought, did they buy or did they bring? They bring. So we use the form brought. So and removing her soiled and ragged clothes, dressed her in clean attire. The sad eyes and patient face of the little one touched many hearts, and even knocked at them for entrance, but none opened to take her in. What does this mean? The sad eyes and patient face of the little one touched many hearts, right? Because there are many who felt sympathetic towards her. Hmm? And even knocked at them for entrance. Means,
Ask them to give.
huh?
Ask them to give.
Yeah, they were also tempted to take her with themselves and to do something for her. But none open to take her in. Means the hearts were not that big, were not that open to be able to take her in. Okay? To be able to accept her and take up the responsibility of her care. Who wanted a bedridden child? Right? It's a responsibility. So it's more like a burden for everyone. Take her to the poorhouse. Poorhouse, place for the destitute. Write down over there. Poorhouse, place for the destitute. Destitute is another word for what? Needy. So instead of saying poor and needy, you could say destitute. Okay? So take her to the poorhouse, said a rough man, of whom the question, what's to be done with Maggie, was asked. Nobody is going to be bothered with her. So who said this, take her to the poorhouse?
Rakhi.
Yes. When he was asked
What should be done?
what should be done with Maggie? He said nobody is going to take her, so just take her to the poorhouse. The poorhouse is a sad place for a sick and helpless child, answered one. Then, for your child or mine, said the other, lightly speaking, but for this brat, it will prove a blessed change. She will be kept clean, have healthy food, and be doctored, which is more than can be said of her past condition. So what are they saying now? Take her to the poorhouse. The poorhouse is not a place worth living. But then they say, for this girl, it would still be good for her because she would be in a better position than what she is right now. At least there'll be somebody taking care of her, providing her with the necessary medical care and aid that she needs. Then, there was reason in that, but still it didn't satisfy. The day following the day of the death was made the day of burial. Which was the burial day now? She had died today and the burial was the next day. The day following the day of the death was made the day of burial. A few neighbors were at the miserable hovel. Hovel is again small hut. Write down over there, hovel. Small hut. This chapter has many words like that of which means you need to write. Okay. So, a few neighbors were at the miserable hovel, but none followed dead cart as it bore the unhonored remains of this remains to its proper grave. Dead cart is what? The vehicle in which the dead is taken. So that is a dead cart we are talking about here. As it bore the unhonored remains to its proper grave. Proper means poor. This lady was poor and she was also not respected. So that's why we are using words like these. Unhonored remains to its proper grave. Farmer Jones, after the coffin was taken out, placed John in his wagon, right? Farmer Jones took John and drove away, satisfied that he had done his part. Mrs. Ellis, the lady who took Kate, Mrs. Ellis spoke to Kate with a hurried air. A hurried air means fast, quickly. Bid your sister goodbye and drew the cheerful children apart ere scarcely their lips had touched in a sobbing farewell.
Goodbye in this, we don't have a E here.
We don't have a. Yeah, they've written it in inverted commas, so that's why. Otherwise, there should be a BYE in a path. Huh? Then, so tearful air means before. So, what are we saying? And drew the tearful children apart, ere scarcely their lips had touched in a sobbing farewell. Means she didn't even give them time to meet each other, to speak to each other, and to bid a decent farewell. Okay? Hastily, others went out, some glancing at Maggie, and some resolutely refraining from a look. Refraining is avoiding. Because they might have been feeling guilty, so they want to avoid that thought altogether. So they were refraining from a look until all had gone. She was alone. Who was alone now?
Maggie.
She was alone. Just beyond the threshold, Joe Thompson, the wheelwright, write down over there, who makes or repairs wooden wheels. Wheelwright. Person who makes, repairs wooden, wooden wheels. Okay. So Joe Thompson, the wheelwright, paused and said to the blacksmith's wife, who's a blacksmith?
Who makes shoes?
Who makes?
Shoes.
No.
Swords.
Makes things,
Swords.
somewhat things made of iron. So maybe iron is, again, swords must be made of iron, so you're correlating it to that. So write down over there, blacksmith makes and repairs things made of iron. Okay, so paused and said to the blacksmith's wife, who was hastening off with the rest, "It's a cruel thing to leave her so." So who said this to whom?
Option to the blacksmith.
Right, to the blacksmith's wife. He says it's a cruel thing to leave her like this. Then take her to the poorhouse. She'll have to go there. So the blacksmith's wife very conveniently said, take her to the poorhouse, that's the only option. So she'll have to go there, answered the blacksmith's wife, springing away and leaving Joe behind. Springing away shows that she quickly left. So that means how insensitive she might have been. Okay? Or there are times when one can genuinely not do anything. But I'm sure if someone wants to do something like Joe Thompson, he can do, right? So, for a little while, the man stood with a puzzled air. Puzzled air shows that he was confused. He was in a fix. What should I do? Then he turned back and went into the hovel again. Maggie, with painful effort, had raised herself to an upright position and was sitting on the bed, straining her eyes upon the door out of which all had just departed. Imagine, a vague terror had come into her thin white face. So what was the terror? They are not saying that she was scared, she was fearful. She was terrorized. Why was she terrorized?
Because she would be left alone.
Yes, she would be left alone. Imagine you can't move. There's nothing that you can do on your own, and everyone leaves, and you're stranded alone in that room. How you must be? And that she's a small kid. So a vague terror had come into her thin white face. "Oh, Mr. Thompson," she cried out, catching her suspended breath. Don't leave me here all alone. Though rough in the exterior means?
Maybe several words.
No, Joe Thompson.
Appearance was tough.
Yes, he looked very strong, Joe Thompson. Though rough in exterior, Joe Thompson, the wheelwright, had a heart and it was very tender in some places. So how was Joe Thompson? He looked very strong, sturdy types, but then he had a very soft and so he was very soft-hearted. Okay. He liked children and was pleased to have them come to his shop, where sleds and wagons were made or mended. They were made new or they were also repaired for the village lads without a draft on their hoarded sixpence. Without a draft on their hoarded sixpence means free of cost, right or no? So here, how was the character Joe Thompson? How was his exterior?
He is tough on the outside and
Soft from within. Huh? And what did he do for the village lads?
he repaired their carts
For free, without charging any.
And he also liked children.
He also liked children. Right. No dear, he answered. So no dear to what? When she said that don't leave me alone. No dear, he answered in a kind voice, going to the bed and stooping down over the child. You shan't be left here alone. Now if you see over there in this also, the word shan't, how is it being written? SHA''N''P. You shan't be left here alone. Then he wrapped her with gentleness, almost of a woman, in the clean bed clothes which some neighbor had brought, and lifting her in his strong arms, bore her out into the air and across the field that lay between the hovel and his home. Right? So his house and hovel, between that there was a field. He carries her and takes her. Okay, अब तक क्या हुआ? What did we do till now? Initial what part had we done? The first part. So now, okay, after the people came, what happened? She died and there were people who came. We spoke about this. Who will go with whom? Then what happened?
They buried her the next day. They buried her the next day. The mother.
They buried the lady. And what all did they bring for the household? Yes.
And I guess some food also for the children.
And food for the children. And also those the clothes that she was going to be draped when she was being put in the grave. Grave clothes, I guess. Grave clothes. And then, what else did we speak about?
He first took John in his vehicle and drove away. Then the
Other
other
lady,
lady.
Mrs. Ellis.
She came and told Kate in a very quickly and told her to say goodbye to her sister.
Yes, she hardly gave them time to even bid a good farewell.
And then Joe Thompson and then the blacksmith wife were talking about Maggie, that she shouldn't be left alone.
And
So
the blacksmith's wife?
she said that take her to the
Poorhouse.
and then she left.
And
But then Joe Thompson went back to Maggie and talked to her.
right. And how was Maggie's condition at that time?
She was terrorized.
She was scared. Okay. There. So now the last part we did was he took her across the field to their house. Now Joe Thompson's wife, who happened to be childless, was not a woman of saintly temper. Saintly temper means not a woman of saintly temper. There's one word which we did in the intro part.
She used to get tempered easily.
Vinegar.
Vinegar tempered. So this is the same thing but a synonym. Okay. So she was not a woman of saintly temper. So she was ill tempered. She used to get angry easily, upset easily. Huh? Nor much given to self-denial for others' good. And Joe had well-grounded doubts touching the matter of greeting that he should receive on his arrival. Mrs. Thompson saw him approaching from the window and with ruffling feathers met him a few paces from the door as he opened the garden gate and came in. He bore a precious burden. See, underline this. What is she being called? A precious burden. And he felt it to be so. As his arms held the sick child to his breast, a spear of tenderness went out from her and penetrated his feelings. A bond had already corded itself around them both, and love was springing into life. So they had already formed a close connect, a close bond with each other. Okay, now again I'm doing this, I didn't explain it. So now Joe Thompson's wife, who happened to be childless, was not a woman of saintly temper. How was she?
She used to get angry.
She used to get angry easily, she was irritated. Nor much given to self-denial for others' good. So she used to not think about other people, she was more concerned about her own things. And Joe had well-grounded doubts. Well-grounded doubts means strong doubts, okay? Touching the manner of greeting he should receive on his arrival. So what does this mean?
He knew that she would treat her.
Yeah, he knew that how her nature is, and he knew that she is not going to welcome the girl to the house. Mrs. Thompson saw him approaching from the window and with ruffling feathers. Ruffling feathers, what does it mean? Upset. She was upset. Write down over there, upset. With ruffling feathers, met him a few paces from the door as he opened the garden gate and came in. He bore a precious burden and he felt it to be so. As his arms held the sick child to his breast, a spear of tenderness. So when he was holding her and taking her, at that time there was a strong connect, a strong bond that they felt with each other. A spear of tenderness. Right over there, spear of tenderness, over there you write bond, connect, write these two words. Then and penetrated his feelings. The bond had already corded itself. Again, it refers to the connect that they had formed itself around them both, and love was springing into life. What have you there? Sharply questioned Mrs. Thompson. Now she knows everything about it, but still she says, "What have you there?" Joe felt the child start and shrink against him. So why do you think she must have shrunk against him?
She was scared.
Yes, she must have got scared that I'm again going to be alienated and again be alone. So she didn't want to go. So Joe felt the child start and shrink against him. He did not reply, except by a look that was pleading and cautioning. Cautionary means warning. So he gave her a look, then he was pleading also, and he was cautioning her also. So pleading and cautionary, that said, wait a moment for explanations and be gentle. What did he say? Wait a moment, you'll get all the answers to your questions. Just be gentle, hold on. And passing in, carried Maggie to the small chamber on the first floor and laid her on a bed. Then, stepping back, he shut the door and stood face to face with his vinegar-tempered wife in the passageway outside. Because he didn't want to speak about it in front of her, so he spoke to his wife outside. Vinegar-tempered again, ill-tempered. Ill-tempered. Then, you haven't brought home that sick brat. Anger and astonishment were in the tones of Mrs. Joe Thompson. Her face was in a flame. Means she was angry. I think women's hearts are sometimes very hard, said Joe. That sometimes women can be very hard-hearted from the way she was behaving or reacting. Usually, Joe Thompson got out of his wife's way or kept rigidly silent and non-combative when she fired up on any subject. What does this mean? He
He
knew.
didn't use to engage.
Huh?
He didn't use to engage in talk, like arguing with her.
Yes, he wouldn't want to argue with her at any time, so usually he used to just stay quiet and try to put an end to the conversation. It was with some surprise, therefore, that she now encountered a firmly set countenance and a resolute pair of eyes. Countenance means facial expressions. Countenance. Click. Gumo gaya? It comes. Right over there. Facial expressions. And a resolute pair of eyes. Then women's hearts are not half so hard as men's, she says. Joe saw, so what does she say? That women's hearts are not so hard, not half as hard as men's. Then Joe saw by a quick intuition that his resolute bearing means strong. He was being firm here now with what he wanted. So his resolute bearing had impressed his wife, and he answered quickly and with real indignation. Indignation means annoyance. Better word, indignation, annoyance. What's that word? Do this one paragraph, then we continue with it. So he spoke with indignation. Be that as it may, every woman at the funeral turned her eyes steadily from the sick child's face. So here he said, no, that women are very hard-hearted. So he's saying over there, every woman turned her face away from the sick child. And when the cart went off with her dead mother, hurried away and left her alone in that cold hut with the sun not an hour in the sky. Means, sun not an hour in the sky means the sun was going to set. It was going to get dark and night, and at such a time they were leaving her alone over there. Okay, this will continue. There were John and Kate from there. Oh, yeah. Understood till here, no?
Yes.
So take a break, I'll be back in 5 minutes.